Ricky here, and you're watching Ricky Talk Shop. I have here today a Yaoin, or I've seen some people put a Q in there and pronounce it Yaqin. These are also sold under the name Silk Audio and maybe a couple other brands. This is the VK2100. It's an integrated amplifier, tube preamp, transistor power amp. This is one that I got on trade a few years back. I had never heard of the brand at the time, and since I've owned it, I've kind of read about them online a little bit, and there's a lot of controversy about this this brand. They're made in China. There's no dealers or retailers here in the U.S. So if you want one, you have to buy it from China, or I believe there's a company in Canada that's importing these. And there's some people out there that have them that, you know, they say they sound great, and I'll agree with that. This amplifier always sounded great. So there's some people that really like these, and then there's other people that say just stay away from them. They're junk. They're even dangerous to use, I've heard. So I'm going to show you kind of what's behind some of that. First off, you'll notice I'm in the U.S., and the first thing I noticed because this one died, this stopped working, and I took the cover off of it, and you see right away, it's a 220 volt, 50 hertz transformer. I looked on the back panel, there was a little label sticker that said 110 volt, 60 hertz. That just peeled off, and printed on the back panel on the chassis itself is 220 volt, 50 hertz. So that's our first problem. They were like, oh, somebody wants a 110 volt version, we'll put a different sticker on it. So what'll happen if this was backwards, if you had a 110 volt unit and you plugged it into 220 power, all the voltages in the circuit would be doubled and it would go up in a ball of fire. But a 220 volt unit with 110 power, you just get really low half voltage. It puts out roughly half voltage throughout the whole circuit. And I tested, part of what's bad on this one is the transformer has failed. There's no power out of the 63 volt tap. So this failed doing half the work it's designed to do. Think about that. But all these others, there's a 6.3 volt here to heat the tubes. That's right around a little over 4 volts. There's 190 volts here. I got like 105 out of. There's a 14 volt here that was like a little under 8 volts. So this thing sounded fantastic running low voltage all the time. There's some design problems with these amps. The chassis is really, really thin. Just super. I mean, it's really, really thin material. And it's really not a big deal, except where it's supporting this big heavy transformer and these big heat sinks. And there's just nothing there to hold all that weight. Other design flaws, these units tend to run very, very hot, including this one that, again, was running at half power. If you look underneath here, there's no holes on the bottom of the chassis for airflow on the heat sinks. If you look at the top of the unit, it looks like there's a lot of heat vents up there, but they're not really very open. So you get very little airflow up front because there's a glass panel on the front so you can see the tubes. There's a little mirror piece in there that wraps around the tubes, and the tubes are completely boxed in. So just very, very poor design of the enclosure for the heat sinking, for cooling. Now, a big advertising thing with these amps is that they are supposedly made with name brand components, which is quite impressive since they're only like $400. I think is what they're going for right now, right around 400. And I want to show you this their name brand components. This capacitor here there's a plastic cover over it, so you can't really see it, but you can feel through the cover. This capacitor is bulged up inside the cover. There's a big dent in the side of it. There's a big dent in the side of this one. These other capacitors you can feel on the sides of the can. It's not really dents, but just some ripples in the cans. And what that is these are reject parts. I mean, sure, they're name brand, but they're parts that weren't good enough to use for something else. And I haven't gone through and tested other components in here, but I would be willing to bet that you can go through and test the other capacitors and the resistors, and it's all just going to be a little outside of or right borderline on being in spec. So you're getting that for your $400. And I'll show you the underside of this circuit board. And this is where this thing really gets a little scary. If we get underneath here, hopefully you can see this in the camera. This thing's just loaded with all these dull, cold solder joints, these huge blobs of solder in here. This is really, really ugly construction. If they were doing any sort of quality control checks, I don't think there's any factory in the world that would look at this and then send it out the door as a product with their name on it. Yeah, it's really bad. So I would say, well, yeah, this does sound good. This was a good sounding amp. I can't complain about that. And I got it as part of a trade deal, so I don't have very much into it. So I can't really be upset that it died. But if I was going to spend $400 on a stereo amp, I mean, look at Onkyo and Yamaha, and Marantz probably has something. I'm going to save the tubes out of this, and I think the rest of it's just garbage. There's nothing here worth saving. Again, this is Ricky Talks Shop. Hope I've been able to shed some light onto why you see such different opinions of these amplifiers. Thanks for watching.